meeting of the Bellingham Planning Board. For the audience out there, we're paying strict adherence to social distancing and wearing masks and keep our attendance down within the room. If you have a hard time hearing us, please reach out to the people at the cable and we'll try to adapt our voices as best we can. Jim, can you read about the governor's edict for Zoom meetings?
Absolutely. So pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, the number of people that we gather in one place, this meeting will be accessible to the public via Zoom online options. The information and instructions at the end of the agenda. And as the chairman mentioned, the new order does require masks at all time in a public meeting. So we'll be wearing these throughout the evening.
And we'll try to be as quick as feasible for everyone in attendance tonight, especially our guests. Jim, the first thing on the agenda is a continuation of the public hearing for Red Mill. Could you give us an update, please?
Sure. So we've actually received revised plan sets for Red Mill definitive plan. They have gone to our peer review engineer. They are working diligently on things such as drainage and grading. So we're not prepared to review that this evening. The applicant has requested a continuation to the December 10th meeting, which I think is a reasonable request time-wise. And our peer review engineer seems prepared to go for December 10th as well.
I'll move to continue the hearing till December 10th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of continuing the public hearing for Red Mill to our next meeting, December 10th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. At this point in time, that plans to be an in-person meeting, but we'll advise you as time goes on. With the influx of what's going on in the state, we need to be careful for all the participants and the guests that attend future meetings. Jim, next on our agenda is a continuation of the public hearing for 161 and 169 Maple Street. Can you give us an update on that?
Sure. So actually, the applicants are here this evening. If you'd like that, they're welcome to come up to the table. So in your package tonight, you have the checklist from myself, the staff checklist. You also have the response to comments. So the response from the applicant on the checklist. You should have the plan sheet before you as well, showing both on the front the drainage plan and on the back an approval not required plan that you're probably very familiar with. And then lastly, are the comments from the deputy fire chief that should be in your package.
Who would like to go first? I would like to request is an overview of what's going on and where we stand as of this evening.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much. As for the record, my name is Kim Crowa, Baker Braverman Barbadoro on behalf of the applicant. And have with me the applicant and then our engineer from DZA. So we had submitted responses to Mr. Kupfer's staff checklist, and included in those comments were various areas that we are going to update. So we're not expecting the meeting to be closed tonight, but we did want to come here and present the plan as we had proposed it, determine if the planning board had any additional comments, because there are a few things that we're incorporating into the new plan for the next meeting. So that's the overall purpose, but just stepping back for a little bit and let me know if anybody can't hear me. I know this muffles also.
Kim, if you guys want to spread out, I feel like you have to stay that way. I'm not telling you to, but. Little humor there.
So the development plan application is for two properties that are side by side. 161 Maple has an existing mulch business that's been at that site since about 2011. 169 Maple is an existing residence. We filed the LMP, the owner of the property, filed an A&R plan that essentially combine the two properties, although they've maintained their status quo at this point. And during that process, we have been going through a stormwater approval process with Conservation Commission that has been resolved. So we did have prior litigation with the zoning board and the town with respect to the mulch business. And that was dismissed in 2019, I believe, although I don't have the date in front of me. And basically the ending of that was that LMP was going to go through and manage the stormwater that was on the site that had never gone through a formal approval process. There really is no stormwater treatment on the site as it sits now. So LMP developed plans to comply with the stormwater, presented them to Conservation Commission. There were a series of hearings and changes to the plans that resulted in what was included in the package, the C2 drainage detention basin and drainage system that was in the plan. So that was approved by Conservation Commission. And Steve here will go into the details of that. But when the order of conditions issued, basically the Bellingham Conservation Commission determined and concluded that the plan as proposed complied with the Wetlands Protection Act, the Massachusetts Stormwater Standards, and the Bellingham Wetland Protection Bylaw. So we have already installed the buffer mitigation. There's a wetland area on the side of the property, and part of the order of conditions included additional plantings. So those are shown on the C2 plan that's in there, and that's along the side of the property near the wetland area. Those went in around mid-October. Part of the package and the responses, one thing that's not on the plan is we're proposing a 6-foot fence to go along the front of the property to shield a little bit more from Maple Street, the mulch business that takes place on that property. So that'll be part of the incorporated plans that are revised and resubmitted. We'll be demolishing the residential house that's on 161 Maple Street, and that's where the detention basin will go. And the project, where it's really a development plan application, it triggers the requirement because there's more than 10,000 square feet of vegetation that's being modified by this. And so that's what we're seeking approval for. And so, Steve, if you could go through the plan itself and the system, I think that would be helpful.
What would be best as far as describing the plan? Usually I talk to a plan, is there a place to put the plan on an easel, or should we just discuss, do you have the plan in front of you, just drawing C2?
Yeah, so they have the C2. I think maybe when you have your revisions, if you want to send a PDF, you can put it on the big screen the next time, but if you just want to talk to the plan.
Okay. Excellent. So north on this plan is to the right. The stormwater currently runs off the site towards the west. And what we're proposing is a block wall around the perimeter of the property. The blocks are approximately 2 feet wide by 2 feet deep by 4 feet long. They'll be all connected together and sunk into the ground at least a foot. So there'll be a 1 foot reveal. It'll be like a 1 foot tall curve along the entirety of the property. And that curve is there to direct stormwater into our proposed stormwater management system. So as you go from, say, the southern edge of the property along the western edge towards the north, water will enter into the first of 2 sediment forebays. And from that sediment forebay, it'll go into a large wet detention basin. The wet detention basin discharges through an outlet structure on kind of the northeast corner of that wet detention basin. And out to the west, we're proposing a stabilized discharge area at the downstream end of the pipe. The wet detention basin is there to mitigate peak runoff to pre-construction conditions. The sediment forebays are there for water quality, and one of the other aspects of the stormwater design is if you look in the second sediment forebay, we call out the catch basin. That catch basin is designed to collect the recharge volume, which will go into a holding tank That holding tank is on the southern edge of the wet detention basin in the access road. That 24,000 gallon tank will pump water up to a subsurface infiltration system. That subsurface infiltration system is within the emergency access road that's adjacent to Maple Street. So if you look at the entry into the property off of Maple, you take a right as soon as you come into the property, you go up on the emergency access road, we're bounding the system there. It's underneath that emergency access road that we're proposing the infiltration, and that's for groundwater recharge. So again, the system includes a 1 foot tall curb around the perimeter to direct stormwater into 2 sediment 4 bays, which discharge to a wet detention basin. And we're treating for the recharge using a 24,000 gallon holding tank and pump system up to a subsurface infiltration system.
Okay,
Yes.
is there anything else?
No, that's the system.
Okay. Jim, bring us up to date on the checklist, if you may.
Yep, so you have in your package, the checklist with actually, the better one is probably look at, the response to the checklist, that has some good comments in there. As the applicant has mentioned, there's some revisions that they're recommending making for the next plan set. There are also some items in the responses, that they were requesting, either waivers for or not to proceed, with responding to. I think some of the items such as environmental controls, landscaping, parking, I think those are things that certainly needs your attention to and discussion with the applicant perhaps. There's certainly some issues there that have not been addressed yet.
Can you specifically address section 240-47 with regards to permit activity?
So that's environmental control. So let's see, so I've called that out as something that we need just more evidence of compliance on. And the reason I call that out is because if you're looking at 240-47, I'll just read this verbatim so we don't get confused here. No activity shall be permitted in any district unless following requirements are met. Applicants may be required to provide evidence of probable compliance, whether by example of similar facilities or by engineering analysis. Issuance of a permit on the basis of that evidence shall certify the town's acceptance of the conformity of the basic structure and equipment, but future equipment changes and operating procedures must be such as to also comply with these requirements. So how I interpret that, and certainly up to the board, but my interpretation of that is this board cannot issue a development plan for the site unless there is some sort of evidence of compliance of the general zoning bylaws, and in this case for the environmental controls. So, I mean, I think the request would be to provide some evidence of compliance that's satisfactory to the board.
Right now, what's your feeling on the status of the checklist?
Well, they're certainly making some progress, and there's some things that they need to address.
Okay. I'd like it to open up to the board for any comments. Brian?
So, Jim, what page am I looking at for the environmental?
Yep. So, so 240. Oh, sorry. On the checklist.
Yeah.
So page 4, the bottom of page 4, there's the environmental controls, or the second half of page 4, 407.
All right. So, will you be, is it part of your supplement? Will that be part of what you're supplementing in the future, or?
We had not been planning on it. We're looking at it with two different aspects. I guess one of them being that the multi-yard complies and that the noise, as it's defined in the bylaws, as far as the exterior of the property, that there aren't any violations of the noise control areas, and that there's also an exception for construction noise, which this could fall under. So part one is that just looking at the site, it complies with the environmental control. Noise appears to me to be the most pressing. That's been part of the discussion with the town previously, and part of the proposal with the fence will address part of that also. The other part of it is that the approval that we're seeking tonight is really to incorporate stormwater into the site. The mulch business itself has been there and is not changing or presenting any new activity that would fall on the development plan application. So there's the two aspects we're looking at it. We do want to show that we're complying and we're doing all the things that we need to do, but considering what is being proposed and that it's a net benefit to everybody to have the storm water system put into the property, that we're looking at it as that clearly doesn't generate any noise. It's going to be an issue. It's not air quality. And so in order to get that approved, we feel like it is something that the board could consider just in and of itself, and insofar as the activity that's actually being proposed in this plan.
But to Jim's point, you are in reviewing this application and then issuing a decision, are we not making a determination on those things that you feel that you comply with anyway, so that we have to review those as part of this process?
Yes and no. Right? So you are reviewing, certainly the environmental control aspect is part of the bylaws, and in reviewing the development plan application, you're reviewing the bylaws. But where that section of the bylaw, the environmental control section of the bylaw, is predicated on certain triggers. So stormwater, there never was any stormwater that was involved on the site. So we're seeking to address that and finalize that. Air quality, there has been throughout the years different oversight of this project as a mulch yard, and it's been shown to not create any air quality issues beyond what's permissible. And so it comes back to us as sort of a process of how much do we need to show. We do have a mulch yard. We had a noise report done previously, but there was a separate set of circumstances, so it's not totally applicable. We could present that, but it wouldn't be completely on point. Or we could potentially look at getting it updated if the board feels that that's absolutely necessary. But as far as what's being proposed and the activity being proposed, not actually generating noise, it seemed that it was possible to have it be reviewed and approved based on what was submitted.
So I appreciate what you're saying. I think, however, is that we are conducting a development plan review that needs to be thorough and encompassing all of we got to check all the boxes. If we're going to do it, we have to do it. And if we're making sort of, if within that decision we are certifying that certain things are a certain way, then we need to look at them, I would think. So I would like, and when you come back the next time, if you could take go through the list that Jim has generated and give us what we need to do a full review of the application.
Look at that.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So I just want to, so Jim, right now the checklist is not complete.
Not complete, but it sounds like, they're certainly willing to.
And we have a differing of opinion as opposed to subsection 240-47.
It
Correct?
sounds like they're amenable to adhering to it though.
Okay,
And a couple other comments if I may real quick.
certainly.
Just in terms of, I know GZA is on board. I wasn't sure if GZA is also doing things like the auto turn that we had discussed, and maybe discussed this in conservation a little bit for the largest fire truck, and I forwarded you over the diagram for it. I wasn't sure. I know GZA is specialist in stormwater, but I wasn't sure if they were going to be assisting you on that as well.
So we did recently get those comments. We actually haven't figured out how to address those precisely,
Okay.
but we will address those with the resubmission.
Okay.
Just wanted to address a point. You mentioned the noise, the light, the air quality, the vibrations, the stormwater. I appreciate what you've done in the stormwater. But this business is in the middle of a neighborhood. And we can't lose sight of that. I know you've had some concerns as a driving by. We've heard from butters having some concerns. So I would like to propose that we put this out to a future date until we can get very comfortable with the status of the checklist and make sure we adhere to section 240-47 for the benefits of all parties involved. Jim, what do you think, how much time do you need?
Well, I guess look at the applicant, how much time do you realistically need with the holidays and all that coming up? The board only has one meeting in December, so we're probably talking January already.
Yeah, I would think, I think December would be too soon.
Perhaps January 28th. That's the second, or that would be the second meeting in January, or February 11th.
I'd like to push it off to February 11th. The reason being, I think we're going to be potentially in a different situation come February with regards to how often we can meet.
Oh, sure, okay.
So that's my idea, but I'm amenable to the second meeting in January, whatever the board would feel comfortable with.
I think either of those are fine with us.
I'm sorry?
Either the February 11th or January 28th, I think either of those are fine with us.
February 11th?
Yeah, that's good.
Do I have a motion to continue?
So I'll move to continue the public hearing until the February 11th meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of continuing the public hearing for 161 and 169 Maple Street to February 11th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for the work you've done so far. And we'll look forward to working with you over the next couple of months.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Stay safe.
Thank you.
For the continuation of the meeting, that's the deadline.
You out that way, I believe.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Jim, the next agenda this evening is a continuation of the public hearing for Bellingham Shores.
Yes, I believe we have Sean Malone on the line. Sean, can you hear us all right?
I can. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Sean.
Excellent. So, Bellingham Shores. So in your package tonight, you have some updates from Sean Malone. And the main document, I think, referred to this evening is the updated mitigation list, which I believe is dated November 9th. Is that correct, Sean?
That is correct, November 9.
So the November 9th mitigation list. So as you may recall from the last meeting, we've really exhausted our review here. I think the board and the applicants have done a good job working together to get to this point. We've reviewed drainage. The peer review has come to the conclusion that it's a good drainage design with all the conditions and discussions that we've had to date. The last piece here was the improvement of the open space. As you recall, the triangle parcel is in somewhat of a tough shape or condition due to the ongoing construction of the neighboring parcel or project, which happens also to be the applicant's project. From the last meeting, the board had requested, Sean and I worked together on finalizing the mitigation details. And so on page 2 of this mitigation list is what the conclusion of those conversations, and certainly obviously for the board's discussion this evening. Sean, I guess I could walk through these if you don't mind.
That's fine. You're
So,
doing great.
So number 1 is to construct the South Main sidewalk. So that's from Douglas Drive down to the subdivision site entrance. Number 2 is the applicant will construct the sidewalk on Cross Street from, again, the site entrance to the Silver Lake recreational area. I will note that this references the town securing all permits and property rights, and that's typical for these types of projects where we would have a much better opportunity to get those property rights and easements as opposed to the applicant. However, I will note that any required police detail, if they're constructing it, my recommendation is they should be paying that police detail. And I think your client's okay with that, right, Sean?
Yes, we are okay with that.
So we would strike
That's
that.
fair.
Sean had mentioned here the conveyance of land for the basin. So if you recall, a large portion of this open space is going to be conservation land. However, the request came from myself, DPW, and the town administrator to put aside a 1.2 acre location, basically that corners South Main Street and Douglas Drive, so that there potentially is an opportunity to put a stormwater basin there. This is more so to conform to our MS4 requirements, so just kind of planning ahead, thinking ahead. However, it might not be necessary, but I think it's important to reserve the rights just in case. Funds for the triangle parcel. So this has transitioned over time. We could probably talk about this a little more once we complete this list here, but so Sean Malone has provided us a landscape plan. That landscape plan we costed out, DPW costed out for me. But mindful of the fact that they used Mass DOT numbers, prevailing wages. So that number was a little bit on the high end of $240,000. Sean and his team did some due diligence and came back, and you have in your package a quote for $130,000. So getting some quotes from around the area, they were able to complete that same landscape plan for about $130,000. What they're proposing on the table here is $65,000, so essentially half that, $65,000. But with that comes condition number 5. So they're requesting a reduction in that triangle parcel improvements fund. However, also providing lot 10, and so lot 10, as you all are very familiar with, this is a lot that now makes that connection to the lake. So with the improvements to the open space and that connection to the lake, that's what this lot now allows for. There are some conditions that are requested here. One is to approve as shown on the plan. So the plan that we've been talking about so far, the 103 units. And number 2, to allow for the affordables to potentially be off-site if there is a market for that. I will note, and I think the applicant agrees, that potentially all of those being off-site might be a heavy lift, but just remind the board that there is certainly an opportunity to talk about that more at a later date, as this would, a condition of any permit that's conditioned here would also require a inclusionary housing special permit after the fact. So if the board so chose to approve the Bellingham Shores project, it would still be conditioned as such, so that they need to come back to this board for the special permit for inclusionary housing. And at that time, you certainly could, contemplate whether or not, it makes sense for the on or off site. They're asking for off site, and if they found, suitable, units, you certainly could contemplate that. And last is a discussion about reserving rights. And what this boils down to is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but boils down to is, a recommendation of approving any sort of easement that may be necessary for this lot if it came down to a need to improve drainage in that general area. So as you guys know from another project that with another board, there's a drainage concern in the area. They're currently working with the Conservation Commission to try and resolve that issue. This lot may come in to play to potentially help that situation. And so what the applicant's asking is for the ability to potentially pull an easement at some point. And so I certainly would recommend, that I think that would serve all parties. The donation of land to us, or the town of Bellingham, and with condition that you certainly could grant an easement in the future. So that's the gist of it. Sean, please feel free to add anything if there's anything else there.
No, I think that's a good summary. I do want to clarify that it is important to the applicant that if the affordable units are able to be provided off-site, meaning we can find them, they meet the criteria, that they be allowed to use those. That is important. That being said, if they're not available, if they can't find appropriate units that meet the criteria, then they'd have to be provided on-site.
What's the total units?
103 units.
No, that he's
Oh,
gonna,
affordable. The affordable number is, what is, I should have it.
15%. So if we're north of 100, I'm assuming that rounds up to 16.
Yes. Or round up, yeah, 16 or 17.
Okay,
just looking at the market right now, it's pretty hard to get off site.
Yep.
what do we, I got a turn here. What do we have for abandoned properties that could be utilized?
Well, so that's why I did mention to Sean, if they were to go off-site, we certainly have, the building department keeps a running list of abandoned homes. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's north of 20 that are currently in town that are abandoned. Now, not all of them are available. Many are held by banks, but nevertheless, there's certainly a good number of abandoned homes in town.
And when we get to that point for the discussion, and I think Brian and several other board members have mentioned it, the inclusionary housing has to be like-kind quality within sight.
Right, yeah, like-kind quality, yep, yeah, absolutely.
I know earlier they had talked about maybe going back 2 or 3 months of smaller houses and smaller lots. And our goal, if they bring it on site, you should be able to drive down this development, if it's approved, and you should not be able to tell which house is inclusionary and which house is not from the outside.
Right, absolutely.
So I just want to stress, Sean, as we move forward, that's going to be a critical component, both on-site and or off-site.
Yes, of course.
So I'd like to open up to board members. Russ?
I have no further questions. Oh, I had questions and I forgot. So, thank you, Sean. I think it's a generous offer. This is a large project that I think justifies significant litigation. 103 new homes. I was disappointed in the amount that's being offered to correct that triangle space that has been damaged through the other development. Jim, with regard to that, I know that Don priced it out with prevailing wage prices. If the applicant makes a cash contribution to that, would the town be required to bid that project at prevailing wages, or how does that work?
Yeah, very likely we would have to bid it to prevailing wages.
So that 60,000 is really just 1/4 of the expense to repair and to make that a usable area.
Right, so yes, in a way, to meet Sean's, plan, yes, it was, it's essentially a quarter of what would be required. I think, I will say, in part of the discussions, including lot 10 is a significant improvement, to the connection of the open space. So maybe the full landscape plan that was shown there could be pulled back a little bit if the board so chose, but I do agree, a quarter of that cost is a little low.
Under the current conditions that we find ourselves in, the town is not going to come up with the remaining funds to fix that. So that's an issue. With regard to lot 10, I'd like to see the town accept the property, not subject to any restrictions or easements or anything like that. I understand that the parcel is likely large enough to accommodate the easement of whatever kind of structure may have to go there to mitigate whatever the drainage problem is, but I would like to see that parcel come to the town without restrictions. So those are my concerns, that this is a fairly large, impactful project, that there are significant benefits being afforded to the applicant in terms of the the density and all of that goes with it. If there's consideration for off-site versus on-site, with regard to that, I don't think that we necessarily need to make that decision tonight. But my concern is that this is a little light for the size and scale of this project.
Liz?
I just had a question about the inclusionary housing. Is it all or nothing? So it's either all off-site or all on-site? Or can
No,
we
so
split it?
it's completely, it's a special permit, so the bylaw reads that it could be either. And so what the applicant would do is, if it's on-site, if it was wholly on-site, they could say, we're gonna apply once, it's gonna be 17, or let's say 17 units, and we're gonna mix and match throughout the development. If it's off-site, what the board has historically required is very individual permits, because what DHCD, what the state's gonna require is to confirm that the board has gone and looked at the unit that they're doing off-site, and that it matches to a good degree with what the market rate one is. So for instance, a developer came and he was doing townhomes, yet he bought a single family off-site, but it was of similar square footage. It had many of the same amenities, both inside and out. And so ultimately the board agreed to accept that as an inclusionary, and ultimately the state agreed that it was in kind enough so that it would count towards our affordables.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it talks about the detention basin in here, and the last time we were talking about the detention basins, we asked Frank from peer review to go out and put some language together about the clay and the whole detention basin. And he came back with a letter dated the 18th, and on that letter, we basically continued it since then, so it hasn't come up since we got the letter. And when we had Frank here, we were talking about having a geotech engineer involved with this project. And on the first page, number 2 there is some of the languages. It says the detailed design and specification information should be prepared and certified by a geotechnical engineer and include elements to eliminate or substantially reduce the potential seepage through the berms, along with the basin and through the bedding material around the drainage and discharge pipes for the basin. he suggested that we get a better design and put a picture of a design basin for illustration purposes only, in the back of the document. So when I read that information, to me, it felt like that was design work. And this, Sean, this goes to you, I guess. That design work that he's talking about here, my feeling is it should be done before the plan's approved, because the stormwater relies on that clay detention basin. We've talked about the fact that, clay detention basins are not something that we do a lot of here in Bellingham. We also talked about the fact that, there's gonna have to be an O&M manual that goes along with it. We talked about the fact that, keeping up the clay is gonna be different than other detention basins. So to me, I was thinking that we were gonna be seeing more designs on the detention basin and that we weren't quite done with this. Jim, was that the ending point of the conversations on this?
So my understanding, and
Yeah, please
definitely
do.
if you need more, by all means ask, but my understanding is in discussion with Frank that he would be refining a condition for us.
Yeah,
So I asked him if he would be willing to, once I draft something, for him to tweak it so that it makes sense through engineer lingo that, it would be tight for whenever, prior to construction of this basin, that a geotech would play a role in making that final revision or that final design to make sure that the clay core is designed and constructed correctly. But, it's wholly up to the board. I mean, that's how I left it, so I didn't bring it up to Sean any further. But
so clarifying question, where does design end? And, with the plans versus, yeah, some of this might change in the future. To me, this detention basin is the core stormwater piece of this whole deal. And without this stormwater piece being finalized, I'm feeling like the detention basin is not done. And the detention basin is mentioned in this, in this deal. And Sean, you're get your hand up, please. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think what this comes down to, it's a construction detail. It's not going to change anything on the plans per se, the layout, the size of the basin, the discharges, the function of the basin. It's not going to change the maintenance of the basin because this is embedded within the soil berm. It's a small percentage of the berm. So what our intent was, and our understanding with the comment from Frank is, when this goes to construction, there will need to be a geotechnical testing company involved with the project, testing the soil density and the compaction and all that as the construction progresses. So once that company's on board, we can then use their geotechnical engineer to finalize that construction detail and submit it to Frank and the board for final review and okay.
So they would come back to the board later, is what you're saying?
It could, or you could condition it that it's approved by your consultant and your planner. However the board wanted to do. Again, it's an important detail to the basin, but it's a minor detail. It doesn't change a lot.
I guess I would like to hear the rest of the board, but knowing that this part of town has a lot of stormwater problems, I would like to hear the rest of the board's opinion on this, whether this is something that's going to be looked at first before approval, or whether or not it's something that we deal with and approve later, or have Jim deal with it. And I guess I'd like to hear the rest of the board.
Yeah, I believe the building inspector's gonna wanna see an engineering draft drawing up. I know you are, for sure.
yeah, so
That's good.
we could certainly add another layer of that though, to have BSC, Frank and those, vet it first, then hand it off to Tim and I, and then, go from there, as opposed to just, taking the geotech word for it.
Exactly.
Do you need like like a peer review of the geotech?
Well, that's what I meant, so our engineers could take in the geotech recommendations and provide us with those comments.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, you should do.
Yeah.
On the money, does this get put in an escrow account before the project starts? How does that work?
So it would be a timing thing. So, depending on, what it is, we typically condition it so that it's either, depending on the urgency, it could be prior building permit, it could be prior occupancy of X units. A lot of the stuff we typically would condition it, maybe halfway through the project, so they've built up some equity and are able to, pay some of this stuff. Rather than just making them kind of check up front.
My just concern is in case something goes right,
Just on the stormwater point, I would say I don't want to leave anything to our imagination. Our experience with this applicant and another project has been that anything that is left to be determined or discretionary always comes back to haunt the town. So to the extent that we can nail it down now, get it expressly put into the plan and the decision in a very concrete way, that would be my preference. In regard to, with other open-ended issues, also, I know I asked, and other people shared the concern of neighborhood character and what the plan was for that as well. And I don't think I've seen anything with regard to how we're going to make this densely packed neighborhood distinguishable and have character on it, other than house, street. I would still like to see that.
I think just to that point, the one thing that we were working on, and you'll be able to see in the kind of draft decision, would be the condition that we have been tweaking a little bit about the varied setbacks between buildings and both frontage and side. I believe different house styles as well. I forget what we landed on, but you certainly could tweak it some more. But in terms of like landscaping, I don't know if there's an ability to mix up the varieties as opposed to, making a line of certain type of tree. I don't know if that's something, Sean or their team could provide as well to kind of mix it up a little bit.
I don't have that expertise. I need to rely on somebody else to show me what their imagination, what they're thinking.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, what was the last part of your statement? It was kind of muffled. I'm sorry.
No, I just don't have the expertise in the background to say I want to see a row of trees here and I want it to be this kind of tree, or do this and then make it look nice. I don't have that. So
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's why, with the subdivision regulations, you're required to put the street trees and develop the streetscape. Beyond that, it's the individual homeowners and what they like. And that's how these lots are going to be developed. And as Jim mentioned, we had talked about a condition as part of the approval that, you have to vary the setbacks, no two of the same houses can be next to each other, something to that effect, to create that variety. But it's a subdivision that's going to have buyer preferences.
I get it, but there's got to be something like you can go through, and I think one of the ideas we discussed or somewhere, when you go through and you tag the mature trees that you don't necessarily have to cut down, and you leave those standing. Where there's other clever things that can be done to give this a little bit of a neighborhood feel. We have some developments in town where you certainly don't get that feeling at all. I would suggest it's across the lake as one of them. There's others throughout town where you just say, God, that's too bad that they didn't have the foresight to see what this would look like, where it's just house, 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 house. So to the extent that you could provide us some sort of clever idea of how we can make that work, I'd appreciate it.
Can I add something to that? Yeah, stage one, are you planning on clear cutting that whole phase?
For the most part, within the limits of work, yes. Because there'll be, for the most part, fairly extensive grading, maybe on but the individual house lots are gonna be cut, I think, as, you know, that phase starts. So the whole roadway for that, you know, phase one infrastructure would be done except for the houses. And then the houses would be looked at individually. And once that road is in and you can start looking at the construction of houses and you get a specific house design, then you can look at that given site and be like, oh, I want to keep that tree, you know, and work around that.
Then you can keep your mature trees that are there, kind of add a little bit of character to each home individually.
Yeah, if that's possible, I think everybody wants to do that. You know, a builder wants to do that, a buyer wants to do that. I think that's.
So you're just selling off the lots and depending on builders to come in and do the buildings?
It could be some of both. It's not 100% determined yet.
You're not doing both.
I'm sorry?
You're not buying the land, putting in the subdivision and then doing the housing too. You're gonna sell the lots off and have and bid them out and have private contractors come in.
That may be possible. Again, that's not 100% determined yet.
I'd like to find out when that does become determined.
Well, that may not be able to be determined until there's an actual project. And I've mentioned to Jim, you know, that you know, the applicant has been talking to some other builders and developers in the area about purchasing the project. So it's unknown right now.
Okay, so you're all right. I see what you're saying, because usually you go in with the intent of what you're going to do. You're either going to do one or the other or both, but you don't know whether you're going to do whatever.
Yep.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
There could be, just to talk hypotheticals, there could be somebody that wants to buy 15 of the lots.
Right.
They'll do those, and somebody else might do another 10, or somebody might do all 103. I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't think anybody can answer that right now.
I just didn't know what your intent was with the development.
Well, you are having discussions.
Yes, there have been discussions. I do know that.
Anyone else before I have a list of concerns? Jim, I want to revert back to Red Mill. We've asked them to add New England flavor to that development. Is that a fair assessment?
Mhm.
And they've done that, correct?
Today, yeah, it's getting there. Yep.
Okay. So Sean, we've asked another developer to make their development have a flavor of New England. And we're gonna ask the same thing of you. And we've been asking now for a while. And you tell us it's up to the homeowner, but it's also gonna be up to, we want something that has a New England flavor to it. I want to pick up on something Brian and other people have said. And I know you can't have two houses the same next to each other. But this is an investment for people. I realize it's an investment for Packard. But people have to live here. We're a small community. And we're looking out for our neighbors and future neighbors. I also agree, I think you're a little light on the triangle, to be honest. The stormwater, before we discuss any decision, I think, Jim, we need to button up the stormwater so that it's in language we all can understand and the public can understand. It's been alluded to that adjacent development. We're now working on our, I don't know how many iterations of retention ponds. Sean, we have one shot to get this right. We don't want to be back here correcting this again down the road. So, we have to make sure that we're all in agreement on the stormwater. I think we can work on donation of the land. I appreciate what Brian's saying, and I agree with him. If we can try to work on that, it'd be encouraging to us. The off-site inclusionary is going to be a point of future discussion on behalf of the town. Phasing, I think we have to outline any decision very tight and robust phasing plan. I also think in any decision, we need a robust and precise construction management plan. And then also, as these homes are built, we're going to rely on inspections. And I know we alluded to phasing at our last meeting, and there was a little discrepancy on what we thought phasing was. And I know we have several phases involving infrastructure. But I believe the board was pretty clear when it comes to moving from one phase to another for housing, that all those houses and lots and infrastructure be cleaned up, that the houses in essence be turnkey or ready for occupancy before you move to the next phase. Other developments in town have not done that, and unfortunately, we're going to try to correct that substantially in this project. And I think you've heard the board talk about that for several months. Also, I would like to, before we reach a decision or ask to draft a decision or vote on a decision, Jim, I'd like to have the opportunity for the public to chime in December. I'd like to have that broadcast as best we can through social media. Before I open it to the public, any board members or Sean have any comments?
Just one clarifying question. So I got a number of good notes. So just the geotech for the stormwater. So just so I understand, the geotech construction detail, from my understanding, is something that needs to be once they've started to grade that basin, they can understand where that clay core from within inches, as opposed to right now it's kind of a conceptual process. So that would be just my only hesitation to try and develop a geotech plan right now as kind of a, and then have to redo it later. But I mean, it's completely.
Maybe we're using the wrong terminology.
I can ask our peer review as well, but that my takeaway from our peer review was that it would happen during construction.
So that's fine. But my concern is when that time comes. Oh, that's outside of the scope. Oh, that doesn't include this. Oh, it's only this size. We're not doing X. I want to know exactly if we have to have somebody come in and say, this is what I think the scope would be. It could be plus this, but I don't want it to leave it to any area where you can argue to get out of the requirement. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there was only supposed to be for this, second phase.
So
More detailed. I hate to use the word robust because I've used it a couple times, but just outlining what's going to happen and foreseeing how it will be developed.
Yep. So maybe a recommendation would be to have our peer review engineer to sit down and give us a scope of work essentially before any decisions even drafted or before the conditions drafted and understand what that scope truly is.
That's
Maybe
fine.
we just reference that in the condition of this would be the scope, and that way even the applicant can see it beforehand so that, there's no ambiguity. This is the scope of work that's necessary.
That's fine.
That's something that makes sense to you, Sean?
Yes, yes. And if I could, I just want to just address a couple of the chair's comments, and maybe there needs to be some future or further discussion, if I may.
Certainly.
So you mentioned this, the Red Mill project. I don't know anything of it. Is it like an MRD subdivision like this?
Yeah, we actually created an overlay. It's much like a 40R subdivision, if you're familiar with those. So it's very similar to what you're proposing here. But they just played around with the landscape a little bit more, I think, is what the board's getting at. I can certainly give you some of those examples.
Okay.
They didn't make them jump through all sorts of hoops, but the presentation was precise and on target with what we wanted as a board, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's still an ongoing hearing, but there was, from the beginning, there was the expectation that there's some kind of character to this neighborhood, both in the Red Mill project and in this project.
Okay. Because I mean, I'm struggling with this landscape a little bit as I'm thinking about it and processing it as you all are talking, and to go on to the individual lots with landscaping, then we don't know what these lots are gonna look like, the final configuration, and so I'm not sure what we could do there. It's basically it's a raw lot, and somebody's gonna come in and say they like this house, they'd like it positioned this way, and as long as it meets all the setbacks and all that, they can do that. And then they'd like, these bushes around it, or that kind of thing.
Sean, I don't think we want to get to the detail of final landscaping for a particular homeowner, unless it is, homeowners association. I think what we want is to reduce the amount of clear cutting on these lots and taking down the trees. So, it adds some character to the development. Is that
Yeah, I mean, in the other project, there was talk of pocket parks, and things like that. Those kinds of amenities, and maybe there's benches someplace, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but
Or perhaps like the landscaped islands, or maybe the extension or part of the sidewalk, there's like a road or an extension on the sidewalk where the crosswalks are, or something like that.
Sean, I think you have a sense of what we're trying to avoid. You know what I mean? I mean, I'll give you some addresses if you'd like to know exactly what I'm talking about.
No need. Yeah.
I think we know what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And if you have any suggestions where this can be done, I'm not saying you have to create, something elaborate or anything like that, but we're trying to avoid that. You know what I mean? So we're not trying to be difficult. I just don't want to see another one of these cookie cutter subdivisions go in, and then, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can leave that one. With respect to the triangle number, I mean, I think that I need to point out, I mean, the difference in the DPW estimate and in our kind of real-time estimate isn't just prevailing wage. I mean, they have, the bid numbers that are taken from projects in, downtown Boston, or, and it's all averaged out. For example, the trees, I think the DOT bid price was about $750 per tree. We, on the estimate that we submitted, we had the quotes that were down, were they $140 or $150? And then you add some, then we add some money in there for planting, another $100 per tree for planting. So I don't think our estimate is off. With respect to the offer number being light, I think that the applicant's opinion and our opinion is that we had been proceeding with this, and the whole concept of improving that land, providing the sidewalks on Cross Street and South Main Street. And then all of a sudden, now the town wants lot 10. So it just was kind of another blow. One of the other things that we're doing with this project too, that's not highlighted in this letter, we're creating an extra 500 feet of sewer to create another sewer stub out to Center Street, requested by DPW. Again, another town benefit. We're providing 94 acres of open space to the town. Some of it can be usable. Some of it can be used for the basin if they need it. Some just left in passive recreation. That's over 7 acres more than what would be required just to meet the standards of the density bonus that we're requesting. And with respect to the affordable housing, I think that, I understand the chair's comments but I think a great point was brought up how there's 20 abandoned houses in town here, where I think that's a clear town benefit to be able to improve those properties and enhance.
Totally agree.
I think that's an important thing that I think can be beneficial to both this project, the applicant, and the town. And with the last thing, and then I'll stop, is the phasing. We did submit that fairly comprehensive phasing plan where we're creating these phases of housing construction of about 15 houses, and we're committed to that. The one thing that I do want to just mention is you're thinking about a condition on that is, I think it'll be important that the condition not be you can't start the next phase until the prior phase is complete. I think there needs to be a little time lag to be able to move crews. So something like 75%, something like that, I think would be reasonable. So just some thoughts that were in my head, and I appreciate you listening.
Sean, can I just go back to the phasing? What I'd like to avoid, if at all possible, is once we get done with one, let's say 15 or 20 houses in a phase, can you set it up so those people are not influenced greatly by moving to the next phase? So you're not bringing a lot of construction material into the phase you just completed and traffic?
I think that will be able to be managed the way that we have it set up with the half of the site and the whole infrastructure, and then you have the separate housing phase. And as you move westward, or I guess you'd be able to then access the site from the other side. So your point is a good one, and it makes sense for all parties involved to pay attention to that and be mindful of that.
So you're almost, in essence, somewhat like working backwards. You take the furthest, you keep going back, so you don't impact what's already been constructed.
Well,
or other areas within the development.
Yeah, a little bit in a sense. I mean, but what we also don't want to do is have people that are the furthest back have to drive through the construction all the time.
Correct.
So, but yeah, no, I think that it can be managed in a way to minimize that impact.
What do you think our next step is?
Well, there's a whole host of conditions I see here that, I think we need to refine at some point. That could be certainly on a draft condition or decision, excuse me. The only item I see here in the mitigation list that I still have question marks on is the number, the number for the triangle. That's my only question mark. I think you guys have been rather clear about all the other ones.
I'm
And
sorry, Jim, can I just jump in real quick? I'm sorry. I meant one other thing with respect to the comments on the reservation of rights on the lot 10, should that go forward. If you're reluctant or unwilling to provide any kind of condition to that effect, then we're not going to be able to completely agree to that until the other NOI for the Silver Lake issues is resolved, because that could be in play in everybody's interest to use that. I don't know that it is, but it could be. So we certainly can't handcuff ourselves, or the town for that matter, with that. That's all. I'm done.
Brian?
I think, we should probably continue the hearing until whenever our next hearing is in December. And take a look at what they have and where we stand.
Pleasure of the board is to continue this. And perhaps at our next meeting, look at asking Jim to do something with the decision for holding off until December. Is that the flavor of the board? Could someone now make a motion, please?
I'll move to continue the hearing until December, whatever it is. 11?
the 10th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
With that, real quick,
Sure.
is there
I'm
any-
sorry. I need to open it to the public as well.
Oh, yeah. Just, is there any things that you need from myself prior to that meeting? I see some conditions and some of that, but that would be during a decision time. Is there anything?
Could you just have a draft of some of the conditions?
I could certainly provide a draft if that's what the board likes, yeah.
Before we have a motion table, before we vote on that, any discussion from the public, please?
Anybody from the public wishing to be heard, you can unmute or raise your hand and I can unmute.
Sean, my understanding is you've addressed the concerns of the neighbor next to the pile.
Yes, we have.
You have one question. Go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon, gentlemen. Hey, I got a quick question concerning the project going on over at Potter Circle. I thought this should be the appropriate forum, considering you're the planning board.
Yeah, so that's not this board. That's a permit for the zoning board.
Well, that's great. After everything I've heard on this meeting, after sitting here for an hour, I'd like you to at least give me 2 minutes so you can at least listen to my concern. I live on Potter Circle. I come home tonight. Potter Circle is effectively gone. You have taken it away for people that don't even live in this neighborhood. You've got a new sign put up that shows Potter Circle continuing from Easy Street straight down towards the development. And you've got 3 houses on Potter Circle that basically don't exist. Now, I wasn't informed by the post office or anyone that I'd be changing my address, so I'm assuming I still live on Potter Circle. My concern is that my wife being disabled, she's had to call an ambulance here once. She has visiting nurses that come from time to time. What are the plans going forward? Or who do I speak to about getting these signs straightened out so that my land where I live is labeled as Potter Circle and not Short Street?
Yeah, Jim Comfort, town planner. I could definitely work with DPW and the police to help you rectify your address issue. No problem.
So are you saying my address will be changing, or?
I'm not telling you anything. I'm just trying to help you out.
Yeah.
Whatever you need, I'm here to help you. So if you need to fix the signage, I can certainly help you with that.
So it's something this board was not aware of. But, you know, please talk to Jim or set an appointment up, and he will try to address the concerns as best he can.
Thank you.
Also, Jim, when you, make sure somehow 911 will get linked in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah, I haven't heard of any kind of address changes, but yeah, if there's any kind of question from the emergency services, they are aware of this project, so I'll definitely touch base with them tomorrow then.
And so
Yeah.
with regards to the post office, best of luck.
You know, I'm from my understanding, nothing's supposed to be changing.
Okay.
And I understand that this was all, you know, I don't know if there were meetings before this. Most of what I've heard about why this is up here has been secondhand, so I won't get into all of that. What my concern is very simple. You've got 3 houses that are on Potter Circle. 2 of them no longer can park in front of their house. They're told they need to move their mailboxes to the other streets. It affects me less because I'm across the street from them. I'm on the corner of Easy Street and Potter Circle. And it's just a concern. Like, they've also added about 5 feet of frontage to the corner of my lot. So whose responsibility does that frontage go to? Is that going to cause my taxes to go up because they consider it my land, or is it still town land? I mean, I really wish somebody would have taken the time and speak to the people that this was directly going to affect before they'd have done this.
Could that be something the assessor could address?
The assessor could certainly address, they're not providing any additional private land, it would be all in the public way, all of the activities that's going on in the public.
Well, they've narrowed the road by 5 feet and they're planning on putting grass in there, I would assume,
And
on
this
the
is-
corner especially.
These are the symptoms and the issues that happen when projects linger for a very long time. So that project was reviewed and approved in 2011. So that's, you know, predates, I think, everybody here on this board.
Which project is it?
That's part of Lakeview Estates mitigation. Yeah. So yeah, that's a project I didn't have a part in, nor did any of this board, but they finally have gotten around to that mitigation. So he's not the only gentleman who's asked questions that raised some concerns. I know DPW has had a number of questions about it.
Sir, I think Jim can point you in the right direction.
Sure, that's fine. I'll shoot him over my name and my, I don't know, do you want a phone number? You want an email address? Whatever works easier for you.
Just give me your phone number. I'll give you a call in the morning.
There you go.
Sure, thank you. Bert.
Appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? So if I'm not mistaken, we have a motion on the floor to continue the public hearing to December 10th. Is that correct? All in favor, any discussion from the board? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you all. We'll see you on the 10th.
Thank you, and again, thanks for the work you've done. It's much appreciated.
You bet.
A
Have a
long
good
way.
night. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Same to you, stay safe.
You too.
Jim, Monique and Corin Street acceptance.
Yeah, so the DPW has provided an update that they recommend accepting those. The grading and the landscaping has now took, so it's in good shape. And so they recommend our recommendations to the town meeting.
Do we need a motion?
I think you need a motion, Jim.
Motion to recommend?
I'll move to, the board recommend the acceptance of the lease and Corin Street.
Do I have a second? Second. We have a motion on the floor that's been seconded to approve Monique and Corin Street. And this will be presented at the town meeting next Wednesday. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Jim, do we have any A&Rs?
No A&Rs tonight.
Have we all had a chance to review the minutes from October 22nd and October 8th? If so, I'd like to get a motion to accept those. You need two separate motions.
So I'll move to accept the October.
Do I have a second? I'm sorry?
The motion for the executive session, you do it that it's accepted, but they're not released.
Fine. So on October 20, we have the minutes for October 22nd. Your motion on the floor to accept. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We also need a motion for the executive session to sign the minutes, but they're not released from an executive session meeting that we had on October 8th, 2020. Do I have a second? There's a motion on the floor for the October 8th minutes. Please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, that motion passes also. Jim, any other actions this evening, other than signing the minutes?
I think that's everything. The last thing is, so town meeting is Wednesday, the 18th, I believe. It's up to the board, so it's gonna be at the gymnasium of the high school. Obviously, all are welcome to attend. I thought, though, given the circumstances going on right now, if the board was more comfortable, and if there was one individual from the board that was more comfortable than others in attending, you certainly could appoint that person to speak on behalf of the planning board when, like for instance, the street recommendation, you could make that recommendation for the board. So I just wanted to bring that up just in case anybody, felt uncomfortable about attending. We would have one representative there.
Are you going? I will not be going.
What date is it when?
Wednesday night?
I'm just, in high risk.
No,
I don't feel comfortable.
Well, I'm surprised that they're.
Yeah, me too.
My
Perhaps
son's,
that
a-
should be continued.
my son's a high school student, and they're remote right now. I'm surprised they're being full.
I'll probably end up going.
I'll probably be. Okay, so we have two people will be attending. Either of them can be appointed that night,
Yeah, absolutely.
speaking on our behalf. Want to thank you both. Have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? Opposed, abstaining, motion passes.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Brian.
Thank you.
Nice,